if you speak to the average person on the street, they know what AI is, they've heard of ChatGPT, but actually in the case of using it, I don't think adoption's anywhere near where it could be.
You don't want an LLM to tell you, do this, do that. You want to have your own reasoning and everything applied still, but it gives you that sort of starting point.
Deloitte ran some analysis last year, so that funds that are using AI for risk assessment have reduced their portfolio drawdowns by 15% on a year-to-year basis. Welcome back to yet another episode of Talking Shop here with IG. I am your host for this particular session. I'm Luke Moore. It's lovely to be here. And I've got Mini-Me with me this morning.
Exactly, the other half of the Moron Trading Show.
So look, the Moron podcast is commissioned. We're back for a second episode. And I think this one's going to be quite interesting. So we've used AI on desk now, for quite a while, probably for the last
year or two.
Specifically, yeah. I think we've kind of dived into much more in the last 6 months. And I know it's something that gets bounded around all the time. But in reality, how do people use it? Okay, exactly. I think if you speak to the average person on the street, they know what AI is, they've heard of ChatGPT, but actually in the case of using it, I don't think adoption's anywhere near where it could be and what people can use this technology for free to help them out with.
Yep.
So what I wanted to do and what we wanted to set this set up is, how do we help you? How do we give you the foundations on a couple of models, a couple of tools that are free to use? How do we use them? Specifically, how can you use them to help your trading? That's the most important part. How can you take these tools and use it as your tech stack? How can you set yourself up and stand up against the big boys, right? And the most obvious one is a commercial benefit. Bloomberg's are $24,000 a year per terminal. A Perplexity Pro license, if you need the Pro license, I don't necessarily think you do, and we're going to talk about that, is $20 a month.
Yeah.
So, convert it into pounds. It is such a massive saving. The ability to access information and run calculations is just unlike anything I've seen in the finance sector, and we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, and you guys are in good luck because you got two AI nerds talking about it. Luke and I, we always go sort of back and forth with the latest thing that we found, and oh mate, look, I tried this out and this is what I got. But now we're taking everything we've learned from our sort of obsession with AI and mixing it with what we know about trading and having this cumulative knowledge and sharing it with you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't use AI to get dressed the same as each other.
No, that's just our chemistry. We're in sync.
That's just a total accident. So how are we going to frame this conversation? We're going to start by talking about the tools, right? So I'm going to give you two tools that are free to access, and you can look at it now. We're just going to explain the differences on why I would use one versus the other and what the benefits are. Then we're going to talk about actually how you can use it. And then we're going to talk about how hedge funds use it. And so what we know about the institutional market, money managers, funds, pensions, how they're using it and what kind of results they're getting. But to frame that, the reason why we're having this conversation today is I met a client the other day. In fact, I was talking to a client who listened to the pod on stops, the one that we did last, the first Moron podcast.
First Moron Trading Show.
First Moron Trading Show.
Something good came out of it.
We did a session on stops, and obviously we talked about using the average true range as a way to set a stop loss. My client took that. He was already using a coding base. So he'd used, as a bit of a mechanical trader, he was using ChatGPT to help him write code, to then backtest the strategy, run it through TradingView, which we have access to on their Pine script, introduce the average true range, and it improved his backtesting performance. And so day one, something that we did on the pod helped, but the interesting thing there was using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, one, I'm glad that we've had a bit of impact, fantastic. But two, how easy or how accessible has the ability to backtest and write coding systems become at the blink of an eye. So we're going to talk about two models. What models are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about my favorite French farmer, Claude, also known as Anthropic, which is the company behind it. Mm-hmm. But then the one you and I have a particular weak spot for is Perplexity. We are big Perplexity fanboys, and what we believe, or I believe at least, is the best search engine out there.
Yeah.
And we're going to sort of look at how we can combine these two. I think that's something that a lot of people are, starting to realize. We realize that just using one is often not sufficient. You can use one for one purpose and then another for another purpose. And that's what we're going to discuss, how you can combine Claude and its functions and then getting the most out of that with Perplexity and the finance offering that they have.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with Perplexity then. So for someone that maybe has a basic understanding of what ChatGPT does, you can ask it questions, it gives you answers. What does Perplexity do?
So Perplexity works more as in terms of a search engine. I call it the Google killer. The way they started off with just, searching for basic information, and then you got your sources, and that was their sort of edge. But they've now sort of leveled up completely by integrating sort of Yahoo Finance, quarter financials, and all these live financial data. So you have this massive database, and then you search for whatever you need, and then it will give you the information lined up, and you can also sort of create programs with it. So for example, they have a live earnings call feature. So you can ask questions about the live earnings call that's going on and ask it to interpret it for you.
In real time.
In real time.
And you're never going to get that anywhere else.
No.
Well, you will eventually as this becomes more of a common practice. But it's taking earnings calls, it's taking the data that comes through, currently specifically just for US stocks, it's worth noting.
Yeah.
Hopefully it grows. And it's taking out all of the key insights. So for example, last week when NVIDIA came out, I sent a text over to all the people that I look after to say, you're going to get the exact data. So as the market moves, you're seeing in real time what Jensen was saying and why it was moving like that.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible.
Yeah, it's sort of like your middleman to interpreting the market.
Yeah.
So Perplexity to search and find and get sort of models. And then we're using Claude, the French farmer, with his, so I call it French farmer because that's what our French colleague Maxime on the desk calls it.
Claude.
So it's a great program. Don't know why they named it after a French farmer. But so we use Claude for the deep research, the reasoning, finding the nuance and hidden insights. Combining those two, magic.
Claude's become one of the best coding bases as well.
Yeah, it is.
It's become really quite impressive. So if you think about Perplexity as live data, okay, so Perplexity is where you start to break into this search engine world. This is where I think it's going to have an edge on the Bloomberg terminals that only institutions have access to, supposedly, or someone that's got a lot of money to put to it. Now you're getting, I would say, tough to put a percentage base on it, but let's just say you could do 60 to 70% of what you want to do on a Bloomberg. You're now being able to do that on Perplexity.
Yeah.
Then you look at Claude. Reasoning, calculations, all these things sound like fancy words. Basically, if you feed something to Claude, like your trading history or your positions, you can then ask it questions. So I use it a lot for taking in research notes. We then dump it into Claude and I say, simplify this. Or I will say, tell me, it can ask me questions about it. So say, right, I've read this, now quiz me on it. So it helps you with education and learning.
Yeah.
What it's really interesting to do is it also can now take in screenshots. So let's say you've got a trade setup, right? You've got a limit, a stop, and everything, you've got it set up. You can dump it into Claude and say, is this optimized based on X, Y, Z? So we'll come into that. But basically, you've got the two differences. Perplexity for live data, Claude as your researcher.
Yeah.
They're the two main differences. So they complement each other quite nicely. So this is where we can talk about how do you use it, right?
That's the
yeah. Where does it change everything? How about, let me just pose a question to you.
Yeah, hit me.
What if you had an axle sat on your shoulder at all times telling you why are you doing that, justifying it, challenging your reasoning, trying to push you, was your risk manager, and it was entirely personalized to you?
That's the thing. That's the purpose of it. And I think to get that sort of like mini axle on your shoulder, you have to learn how to prompt it correctly. So these sort of, when we had the sort of salesperson from Claude coming in and presenting Claude for us, they presented it as an eager intern, willing to learn, happy to please. But it's important to keep in mind that how you prompt it is important. Is just as important as how you prompt it in order to get the output that you want. So it's important that you sort of ask it to be critical, think about it, and give the sort of input that you want. So you say like, this is my stop, this is my limit, analyze this out of a risk perspective. Otherwise, you might have the odd opportunity where it comes off and gives you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
So that's why you sort of have to be challenging that. So how do you sort of get around that? Because I know you've had some issues with the AI just telling you what you want to hear.
you've got to be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't going to be perfect, but that's where I think where you feed it something as opposed to asking you to go and fetch something with Claude. I'd be much happier trusting Perplexity to go and do my research for me. And I'll give an example. We were on the show live the other day, and I think it was the news around Trump was talking about lifting sanctions on Iran, specifically Iranian oil.
Yeah.
And in real time, and I typed into Perplexity, and you can go back and look at the recording. What is maximum capacity for Iranian oil production? And where has it been over the past 10 years? And within seconds, I had a chart showing all the different values of millions of barrels of oil per day and its maximum capacity. And you can see how much capacity Iran had to uplift the market. And we were comparing it to why the oil price was down 3%. So you could say, right, is the oversupply that it brings you, does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe. Then you can place a trade off the back of it. But you're not getting access to that research anywhere else.
No. Contrast trying to find that information just by Googling it.
Yeah, it's nigh on impossible.
No.
Nigh on impossible. But I think to start with, you've got to treat, or you could treat this as your co-pilot when it comes to trading, right? I know Copilot is the Microsoft branded AI, but just ignore that for a second. At the end of every day, if you downloaded your history and you put it into a Claude project, you can then ask it questions. You know, did I move my stops at the right time? Should I be putting more stops on this? Have I got any on at all? Can you optimize this for me based on criteria's ABC? Did I enter at the right time? Did I exit at the wrong time? And you can start to quiz your history. And of course, as you add day to day to day, your trading history, you've got a coach that is going to continue to give you insights. I mean, for example, you could say, right, I've closed 3 trades today. 2 were winners, 1 was at a loss. Why did the one close at a loss?
Yeah.
You know, if my stop was too close, and you can search this, what if I moved my stop lower by 1%, 2%, what would have happened? You can play scenarios on it. Let's say you had a portfolio of stocks. You're a single stock equity guy, your ISA, your SIP, whatever it might be. You dump your portfolio in, and I had a conversation with a client yesterday, face to face. You know, this particular chap had a UK tilted equities portfolio. You know, we can dump that into Claude and just say, analyze my portfolio. All of a sudden, you're going to get real-time insights on, okay, you're allocated into the healthcare sector, you're allocated into, it might be defensives, you know, it could say you actually haven't got any tech exposure, you know, and actually you're going to underperform the index as a result. And then you query it, okay, give me the top performing UK-based tech plays, build me the watch list. And in fact, I want to optimize that based on stocks that are near 52-week lows, where analyst ratings are the furthest away, and I want to look at putting them on now. Give me the watch list.
Yeah, and I think something key that you mentioned is creating a project, right? So it's oftentimes that you sort of feel it's a bit repetitive what you're prompting. You have to give all the information all the time. If you create a project within Claude, ChatGPT, or Perplexity, you have a sort of knowledge base, and then you can give the AI the instructions that you want it to operate from every time. So yeah, it'll take a bit of time the first time. But what I do when I create a project is I first sort of just write out in Claude, hey, I'm creating a project. I want to create a project. I need your help to finalize and fine tune the project instructions. I want it to achieve, the purpose of this will be to analyze my portfolio, my stop losses, risk management, and I always want you to have X, Y, and Z in perspective when giving me a decision. It will then write you a prompt in order, it will give you an output that is optimized for the project to understand, and then you copy and paste that into it. So every time you ask a question, it will always have that sort of knowledge in the back of its head. That just makes your whole process much, much faster and efficient.
Yeah, completely. And you can use it. So, you know, from this trading co-pilot perspective, you can be your coach, but when we talk about this portfolio optimization, you can also run simulations.
Yeah.
You know, what happens if I was running this portfolio in 2008? What happens if I was running this portfolio again during Liberation Day? And it will know exactly what markets moved, how they moved, what stocks, sectors, FX pairs, whatever it might be, and then get it to stress test it for you. So these are all things that we're talking about via Claude. And again, make the distinction. Claude, we feed it something so that it understands what you're giving it. Perplexity, we're searching for things. That's one of the big differences. You could give another scenario, the one that I quite like. I've got a 10K account. I want to take 2% risk. We go back to the episode where we start to talk about the maths on this.
Yeah.
I want to take 2% risk in these 3 sectors, plan my risk management strategy. And it will give you these questions. It'll probably come back to you and ask you more questions. What's your holding period? Do you want to hold any risk overnight? Would you like to hold risk over the weekend? And you can keep talking to it and it will keep giving you tips. And it's quite incredible.
Yeah, that's something I always add to my project instructions. You sort of tell the LLM, always be critical, always ask clarifying questions. That way you fine tune it, because you don't want a yes man LLM. You want someone who actually gives you insight. But yeah, I was actually looking at, so I had a client who called in the other day, and he was saying that, I think that we're going into a recession, American recession, etc. What sort of stocks perform well in a recession? I prompted Perplexity saying, which stocks performed best during the 2008 financial crisis? It gives you a complete and total breakdown. And then you ask, okay, which stocks have the similar characteristics of today in the S&P 500 or the US tech, or even in the FTSE? So I think that's what it's really to be used for, giving you that information and then pushing it into Claude.
Yeah, I mean, let's use a more recent example. So there's a Perplexity. For those that trade on a desktop, there's a Perplexity Chrome extension. So you can just click on that, and it will give you a little prompt box. So you don't even have to go to the Perplexity website. And you could say, right, I like the story that broke last week where Trump was going to talk to lifting the restrictions on nuclear energy. Okay, I remember having a conversation with a client. What stocks should I look at?
Yeah.
Type it in. What stocks could benefit in the US if nuclear energy is lifted? Give me 10 stocks. Come straight through. You're getting Oklo, you're getting Nano Nuclear, you're getting Constellation Energy, all these names that come up. And these may be names you've never heard of before, but now you've got the basis to take those names and do more research.
Exactly. It doesn't tell you exactly, you don't want an LLM to tell you, do this, do that, right? You want to have your own reasoning and everything applied still, but it gives you that sort of starting point, right? You don't start with a blank page. It gives you that first, word on the paper, and then you take that information and you have the basis to build upon it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as always, you need to sort of build your own understanding. It will give you an objective description and analysis. Then you, of course, as a trader, as an investor, have to look into and see, okay, which one of these fit my risk appetite, fit my analysis best. But what it does, it sort of cuts the time process for you to make that research and find those by 95%.
Yeah, and I guarantee that everybody listening to this will have questions about the stocks that they own, about the sectors they're invested in. Another conversation I had with a client yesterday who's got several investments in oil and gas businesses. So UK listed oil and gas businesses. Clearly they look at the North Sea. The North Sea has been kind of slowly, been beaten up and spat out, no money being spent on it. You could be a hedge fund analyst and you could spend time traveling to kind of Aberdeen in the North Coast. You could go and talk to all of the operators to find out, what are the maturities of the wells, how much capacity is left, what are the runtime, what is the cost of a barrel of oil to pull out over there, what is the lead time on getting things delivered. Or you could type it into Perplexity, all of those questions, and they said that they built a map effectively with all of the different oil locations, all of the different drill locations, and it graphically gave kind of almost like a tank of oil, kind of how full or empty is that particular well. It's insane.
That's insane.
It's insane. And you can get all this research, and you've got to be slightly inspired by, questions you're having, conversations you're seeing. Maybe you've read a news article on our platform about the nuclear energy or about oil, and you can sit it in there and you can have a look and you can do this research. It's quite incredible. There is something to be noted on. You've mentioned the prompts already, and that's really important. So getting your prompt right is really important. So a simple one: should I buy Tesla? Good prompt, bad prompt.
Horrendous.
Why?
Because it's too broad, right? You're not specifying anything. Should I buy Tesla? Are you buying Tesla for a long-term investment? Are you buying Tesla for an intraday trade? You're not giving it enough information to give you the answer you're looking for. If you just say, should I buy Tesla? It'll give you, Tesla is a robotics and electric vehicle company, blah, blah, blah. And it'll give you all that information, but it won't give you anything actual concrete that you can use then as an actionable insight. That's what I think.
So how would you generate a prompt?
Okay. So
what do we think? Tesla's the kind of the long run Tesla is the story around robotics, the story around energy, the story around the AI story. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you need to know, looking at Tesla's price today, wherever it might be? What do you need to know as an investor, or what would you like to know?
So here's the difference. If I'm looking at this as an investor, or if I'm looking at this as a trader, my prompt will be quite different.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'll be looking at Tesla as a trader, I would say look at the 52-week range of Tesla, see what the analyst expectations are for short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Mm-hmm. I'd also ask to see the sort of volume, market movement, and I would ask it to take all this information. So I would list the sort of 5 things that I wanted to give me insight on, and then I would say, take all of that, give me all of that information, and make the judgment if Tesla is a buy, hold, or sell. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I would take that, I would have that sort of information given, I'll dash it into Claude, and then I'll do a thorough analysis, and then I'll ask it for entry points, exit points, and to have that sort of completely set up for me. And then if I would look at it as an investor, mm-hmm. I would say I'm looking for a long-term play in Tesla. I believe that Tesla is going to do well due to the robotics and the AI and the self-driving cars. Can you analyze the competitors in the segment? Can you let me know how Tesla is predicting that the cash flow and the benefit of the stock will be? And then give me that insight to tell me if Tesla is a good or a bad long-term play.
Nice and simple then.
Yeah, nice and simple, nice and simple. Yeah, just straight to the point.
I'd look at it a little differently. I mean, I want to know what what part of that share price is currently being assigned to this robotics growth. So
that's what everyone's talking about,
yeah. I'd say, given the share price currently and what we know about Tesla's earnings and forecasts of its share price, how much of that is currently being allocated to this growth story? What are the assumptions that it's being made now? What are the risks to the robotics story? What am I missing? And what does it look like in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And you start to think about these things. And of course, as you build up this conversation with a Perplexity, it's going to be pulling in more and more information. And what Perplexity does really, really well is using recent news or using recent searches from everybody that's using it. It gives you suggested follow-up questions.
Yeah.
So it's as if your plucky analyst person that sat next to you is super proactive. So it's like, oh, hey, I get you've given this a search and here's this output, but you didn't ask this.
Yeah. And it's like, you asked this, you might be interested in this as well.
Yeah, completely. It's incredibly powerful when the fact that this tech is now at your fingertips. It's brilliant. You could also talk about, specific news on the day. So if you go to perplexity.ai/finance, it gives you the real market prices for all of the US indices. It gives you the stories of what's going on. So you could ask it really cleanly, I want to be prepared for my morning trades. It knows what you trade because we assume you're using this as a trading journal and you're dumping your history into there. It's going to know exactly what you need to know in order to prepare you for your day.
I'm now actually prompting Claude to give me a Tesla.
Is that what you were doing?
Yeah.
I did wonder what you were doing there. Look, how do hedge funds use this right now? Kind of what evidence do we have? And we have, so hedge funds that are using AI to actually trade, according to the SEC, so this is data from last year, believe they're outperforming their peers that are not by 12%. So you're taking out all of that human risk. So there's a 12% potential alpha there. That's according to the SEC. I think a lot of people are using it for risk management more than everything else.
100%.
So not necessarily just for idea generation, but dumping your portfolio into it and saying, where's my blind spots? So Deloitte ran some analysis last year, say that funds that are using AI for risk assessment have reduced their portfolio drawdowns by 15% on a year-to-year basis.
Oh, really?
15%, according to Deloitte,
massive.
which is huge. It's if you can say top to bottom, I'm expecting to return 8 to 10% on my portfolio this year because of reasons A, B, C. But now instead of having a 20% drawdown, 15% and 20%, you're going to now only get a 17.5% drawdown. That's material. And you're seeing this stuff happen in real time.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast with Nicolai Tangen, who is running the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Okay.
So he's managing the world's largest fund. They got a couple of cheeky trillions there. Just a few. But what he was talking about is that the one thing that they spend the most amount of time on is, first, of course, they look at sort of what stocks to buy, but they've sort of done that research already. Now they have their portfolios. They're not going to trade in and out, which is, as you do, if on your ISA or whatnot, you're not trading in and out of your ISA. But what they spend the majority of the time on is risk modeling, scenario analysis. If X happens, what will happen with my portfolio? And if Y happens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something that, these guys can use. So like you say, you input your portfolio, just copy paste it in, and you say, if the interest rates goes up to 5%, how will that happen? So you can get that sort of, these guys, obviously, they have the most advanced, computer systems. They have whole teams working on this. But you, as a regular trader, can get this into yourself as well, just inputting it correctly.
Yeah, completely. This is obviously coming out live on the Trade Live with RG show at the same time. And the question we have here is, if the EV was spun out of Tesla, what would the share price be? Is it being held back? Pop it into Perplexity, or Ronni, have you done that?
I've done that already.
Okay,
so I prompted Perplexity. If the EV business of Tesla was spun out, what would the share price be? So if Tesla's EV business was spun out as a separate entity, the estimated share price would be significantly lower than Tesla's current overall stock price, reflecting the value attributed solely to the automotive segment.
So what's it saying?
So Tesla's total market cap is approximately 1.1 trillion, with about 3.22 billion shares outstanding. So they're saying that the EV business is valued at $75 per share.
So EV $75 a share, and the stock's trading $3.45.
Exactly.
There you go.
So,
look, and that's not kind of hard, fast facts. This is IG endorsing the research, but it's fascinating that you can get that level of clarity with a simple question.
And then you might wonder, where did it get this information from? Well, then it gives, Morgan Stanley breaks down their 410 price target into 5 segments, with $75 per share assigned to EV business, $160 to in-car software, $90 to robotaxi, $67 to energy storage, and $17 as to Tesla as a supplier. Boom. Question answered, mate.
Straight in there. Look, we've run through some examples here, but I think the core comparisons to hedge funds, an individual trading and investing has the benefit historically of just a search engine, or the publicly available kind of research notes, but you're going to get them way slower than the market does. They become free after, I think, a fortnight, and they find them really difficult to get hold of. So what can you now do that you weren't able to do before? Right, you can generate signals, okay? You can get ideas sent to you based on your history. Research. You can use these tools to be your research analyst, okay? No more, this is my quant. Perplexity is your quant. None of that. You can optimize your portfolio. You can monitor your movements on a daily basis. And then you can try and use it to come up with new ideas based on what you've been using.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, some of the prompts that in our research shown that obviously we use Perplexity and Claude to help us prepare for this show. A hedge fund would say something like, generate me a mean reversion strategy with the last 5 years of S&P data, and I don't want to spend any more than 10% of my transaction costs. That's a strong prompt.
Yeah.
You could say, here's my watch list, back test every time these stocks have been oversold on an RSI basis, buy 100 shares and just see how that takes you. We've already looked at how you can use it to simulate drawdowns under a 2008 style crisis or another Liberation Day scenario. Or you could say, how will my current positions perform in a 20% sell-off? And actually, how can I then hedge? So we've spoken at length on this show about using options as a diversifier. If you can figure out, oh, this was a good one from yesterday. The person whose portfolio we were kind of using as a bit of an idea, we were asking, what do you think a portfolio is currently correlated to? So if he was using options, how would you hedge? Okay. So you could dump your positions in, you get your portfolio. What is my correlation to the FTSE 100 or the FTSE 250 or the S&P?
Yeah.
You can look at the correlation so you know exactly how much you need to hedge. Let's say you got £100,000 worth of portfolio. You might think, I'm going to go and trade a hedge. I might sell £100,000 worth of FTSE to go delta neutral. But what if you're in Barclays, in AstraZeneca, in, I don't know, Rio Tinto, and then you've got Alphabet and Tesla? That's your portfolio. Well, you're not really correlated to the FTSE, so it's not a clean hedge.
No, exactly.
You've got a little bit of tech in there. It's not going to be quite perfect. Get the robot to tell you what to do. Find out how correlated your positions are in real time to the market, and then work backwards to say, I need to trade gold as a diversifier, or I want to put some put options in this particular size, knowing what the delta is, knowing what your portfolio size is and the correlation.
Yeah, and you can also sort of take a step back. So, right, you're saying how the hedge funds were using it. They were using this sort of moving averages and all these other indicators to compare and contrast their portfolio. If you don't know, you can also take a step back. If you don't know which indicators to use, and you can just simply say, I want to analyze my portfolio. I want to look at risk. I want to look at sort of how it moves in relation to market volume and anything else that you might be interested in. And then you say, which indicators should I look at? And then it'll tell you, look at RSI, moving averages, etc. And then once you have that information, you then go on, okay, thank you. With the prompts with the indicators that you gave me, can you please analyze my portfolio in relation to them and model how the risk of it looks like? So what I'm trying to say here is that don't put in one prompt and say, it didn't answer my question, I'm done. It's a conversation back and forth.
Yeah.
When you're speaking to your colleagues or whatnot, it's very rare that you just say one thing. I mean, obviously, when you ask me to do something, I understand it straight away. I just go straight for it. No need for me to clarify. But when you're speaking to an AI or something, it's a conversation, right? It's a dialogue and not a monologue. So work with it, make it your best friend, and it will give you all the information that you need.
Yeah, I think if we were going to give some kind of takeaways, it's start using it now, right? Yeah. This will become, and we were having debates about how this is going to impact things like education, right? Why sit a course when you can get the research at your fingertips? Like, there's a whole load of conversations you can have. Of course, we've been talking a lot on the show about video and compute and what the demand is. Forget about that for a second. What can you actually do? So, we're not endorsed by Perplexity, we're not endorsed by Claude or anything like this, but accounts are free for both of these things. They do have pro versions where you can get access to more data. Things get ring fenced, you can be more secure with your own data. But just sign up. In terms of benefits, you're getting, with a little bit of inspiration, institutional grade information, quality, proactivity, because this thing is coming to you, not necessarily you having to go to it. And, I genuinely think there's an edge in this. I genuinely
100%.
think if we can help set up a community via this show and via this podcast where we're sharing best practices, if someone comes up with an amazing prompt that's really helped them, share it with us, please. Jump on the chat, give us an email. It's something that we are constantly using and constantly learning. It's really changed. It's really changed the way that we work.
Yeah, and it needs, patience is the name of the game here, right? Yes, it's super quick. Yes, it's AI, it knows everything. But, you and I have been plugging away with AI tools for 2 years now, but we're still learning new stuff. We're still trying new stuff every single day. So my one piece of advice would be to be patient, learn from it, and then try to perfect everything and just continue. Like anything else in life, it takes training, because you talk about edge. Everyone is using AI nowadays. Everyone is using it, everyone is adopting it, but it's how you use it and how you utilize it. That's where your edge comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as well, you've got to look at, what is your metric of success with this?
Yeah.
Right. If we're talking about, giving the correct prompts, you've got to give yourself the ability to learn and get trained. Let's say, for example, you're a parent and you're racing around trying to look after your kids. You've got to go do the school drop off. You've got to come back. You've got to pick them up. Let's say you've never been able to keep a trading journal because you've just never had the time to.
Yeah.
With this, you could in theory bring the amount of time down from keeping a trading journal from, I don't know, an hour, maybe a couple of hours a week, maybe not, you haven't even got that amount of time to do it, to seconds. Because you can go onto the IG platform, you go to the history, you can download it as a CSV file, you can dump it into a Claude, and you can say, right, challenge me on XYZ. I felt nervous today when I was placing this DAX short. Why? And then it can come back to you, and it can be your psychological help as well. So you can use this as your coach. So I would say, instant benefit, time saved.
Yeah.
Forget all the quality of information, but instant is time saved. Then you've got just the improved ability to make decisions. If you've got your eyes wide open and you've got Axel sat on your shoulder, instead of just saying, right, I want to be short the market because of reasons ABC, you could give it a screenshot of your chart setup. You can take a look at it and say, actually, there's three green candles in a row. That's not the most optimal setup, but I traded here. What would you improve? Well, wait for a pullback candle and then trade on the pullback candle. Maybe the entry was just not optimal. So you can get your decision-making improved. And then it's risk management. If you look at your portfolio and you run a scenario on it, that if the market drops by X, you're going to get margin called, run that stress test through this. Because if you don't have that preparation in place now, because platforms don't do it for you. I wish we had a stress test button on the IG platform. There's a scenario backtesting piece on the Tasty platform, but not on our platform. You could go in there and you could put it in, you can stress test it. And so if you're over leveraged in the wrong sector, or if you are trading, say, a Palantir, that if the S&P is down 2, this is going to be down 10, right? Because of the volatility on it. Well, actually, maybe I'll take a little bit out of that stock. It's too volatile for me. I'll put it into something else.
Exactly. And I think that's really hit the nail on the head there. It's, one thing that you save a lot of time in your trading journal, etc. However, when you write down, even if you write down, let's say you do a trading journal every day. Every trade that you do, you write in, I did this because of that, and etc. And this is how I felt. Great, you have that information, but what do you do with it? Prompting this into the AI allows the AI to give you insight and hidden nuances and analyze everything over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier as well, continuously prompting it will allow it to reflect and sort of analyze the entire data over a longer period. So you can perform sort of regression analysis on your results, depending on. So when I do this, you get this result.
Yeah.
So that's what it's used for, in my opinion, to sort of get that insight that you couldn't get yourself.
You say regression analysis?
You can do a regression analysis on it.
I haven't done a regression analysis since my degree.
Oh, me neither, but
you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if I sleep bad, you can do a regression analysis on your sleep to your performance that day.
Yeah.
So if sleep is -2, then performance will be. You can do a regression analysis.
This is all the finance stuff. I mean, I've used it to analyze my diet. I've used it to analyze and create me a gym plan. I've used it to help me plan holidays and travel and tell me where I could go if I've got a 2-week window and I want to go and travel around Europe. Where could I go? The possibilities really are endless. For an individual trader that is, has a day job, is on the commute, if you haven't got someone there being critical to you, how can you suspect that you're going to perform, on a long run basis?
Yeah, that's every prompt that I do. So whenever I prompt something and ask it to analyze something, or I give an opinion, I always say sort of, don't tell me what I want to hear, tell me what I need to hear.
Yeah.
And sort of having that prompt, it allows it to sort of tell you, okay, you look at this, but you missed this section of it. Why didn't you sort of take that into consideration for the next time going forward?
I think the big point here is the applications are kind of endless, right? And I don't want to just speak in superlatives, but what we're seeing is, I don't think through the clients I've spoken to that the adoption of AI to help themselves as a trader's coach, co-pilot, portfolio manager, analysis, analyst.
Yeah.
I just don't think people are doing it yet.
No.
Because the thing I struggle with this the most is you've been given a chatbot, right? Everybody knows ChatGPT. We purposely not talked about ChatGPT today because it's the most popular, it's the most well thought of. But Perplexity can use ChatGPT's models. It can use Anthropic's models. It can use DeepSeek, the Chinese AI. You know, it's got access to all of those different things, so it sits on top of it. But it's knowing what to do.
Exactly.
You know, I'm all for being creative and inspiration, you know, gathering inspiration, but I need to be personally inspired because I don't know what to look for if I don't know what to look for.
Exactly.
So you've been given one of our old sales coaches. He says, right, here's a badge, here's a gun, you're now the sheriff, but you don't know how to police, right? So you don't know what you don't know. So hopefully this I mean, we're going to call this like an introduction to AI as a way to start people thinking and getting their brain moving about, oh, actually, stuff that previously wasn't accessible for me is for free, or at the very least, 95% cheaper than, you know, a Bloomberg or a Reuters terminal that supposedly the big boys use.
Yeah. Okay, Luke, I'm new to the AI game. I'm a trader. Where should I start and how should I start to get going with this?
So I'd go, if I was going to take one thing away from this, it is build a watch list would be my first point of call. That's the gateway drug, right? It is, I've read in the news about this week, the MOD defense spending review. Just this week, Keir Starmer announced that there was going to be an uptick in spending. What should I look at investing in, right? And you, maybe names like Babcock and BAE Systems, you know, they're kind of blue chip names to people that are in the markets that have done this. But if I'm completely new, I think, right, I think I've seen an opportunity here. The UK government are going to spend more money on defense. How can I benefit from that? Right, well, you know, hi, Perplexity. I'm a UK investor. I want exposure to stocks that will benefit from the recent UK. Are you typing this out in real time?
Yeah.
You're typing it in real time. I want to benefit from stocks that will take some of this cash, and I want to invest it in my 20,000 ISA allowance this year. How would you do it?
Okay.
So add another layer to it.
Okay. So the second question is to follow up.
Yeah. How could I allocate my £20,000 ISA allowance? Silence, please.
I have a 20k ISA allowance to allocate.
Any moment now. Magic of TV.
All right. So the first question was, Keir Starmer said there would be an uptick in UK defense spending. Which FTSE companies should I add to my watch list to benefit from the increased UK defense spending?
Mm-hmm.
It gave us BAE Systems,
Mm-hmm.
Rolls-Royce, Babcock International, Kinetic, never heard of them.
Yep.
Serco Group. And then these are stocks that some of these I hadn't heard of. And then I said, to follow up, I have 20k ISA allowance, split it up for me. Sorry, to clarify, split up the ISA allowance in UK defense.
So you're trying to get it now to be your portfolio manager.
Exactly.
And is this Perplexity or Claude?
I'm using Perplexity.
Okay.
So it gives me BAE Systems, 7,000, largest UK with a rationale behind it as well. So it gives me investment allocation rationale. BAE Systems, largest UK defense contract with diverse exposure to major UK and global defense program. Strong growth potential from submarine, munitions, and cyber investments.
Mm-hmm.
5,000 in Rolls-Royce, key supplier of jet engines and military aircraft and naval vessels. Babcock International, 3,000, specialist in fleet management, submarine support, and aerospace services. Kinetic, 1,500, provides advanced military technology services, including cybersecurity and risk evaluation. Mm-hmm. 1,500 in Serco Group, and then 2,000 in defense-focused ETF. Example given, Global X Defense Tech uses ETF. Mm-hmm. Any follow-up questions?
I want to wrap this up soon. Let's just say, if the FTSE fell 5%, what would the value of my portfolio change by?
Oh, that's a good one.
And of course, this is a not investment advice podcast. So do your own research. This is not us telling you to allocate to this, but it's just an example of how you can use the technology.
If the FTSE 100 index fell by 5%, the approximate value of your 20k index defense stock would drop proportionally by about 5%, assuming your portfolio moves in line with the index.
No,
that was that was not good.
No.
We're not happy with this.
No, not happy. Want to know the correlation. Back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
But this is the point. You know, it's not going to be gospel by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and that's what we're saying, right? Don't take the first best answer, plug it back in and back again, and then eventually you'll get the sort of answer that you're looking for. So yeah, it gives me that the correlation is roughly in the range of 0.5 to 0.7 between UK major defense stocks and the FTSE 100.
Okay, so it's less. It's if it's a correlation of less than 1, I would expect it to move by less.
Exactly. So meaning about 50 to 70% of the movement in the defense stocks aligns with the FTSE 100.
So if FTSE falls by 5, this is going to move by 4.
Exactly.
Interesting. Right. Let's wrap it up there. This is just a taste, and I think we will come back to these conversations again and again and again as we learn more. There are people in IG that are brilliant with AI. They weren't available to speak today, but we're definitely going to bring more guests in as this kind of conversation grows. But if you get any cool prompts, bring it to the community, bring it to the chat. If there are cool use cases you find, let's share this information, because I think if we bring up everybody with us, hopefully we'll all make a little bit more money along the way. Cool.
Thank you very much, mate.
Good to have you. Cheers. Thanks for coming. Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. This has been Talking Shop. Please like, please subscribe, please share it with a friend if you think it's been a useful conversation. And critique us, please. If there's things that you think we should talk about, things we've missed, we probably went on a little bit too long with the demonstration at the end there, but we can learn from it. Yeah, just let us know. Thank you.